Welcome back. Do you remember the 2022 Chess.com Daily Chess Championship? That's the ultra large daily tournament that I've been participating in on Chess.com, and I am officially out of the tournament now. Many people, I believe there are more than 1,000 people left in the tournament, and for them it will go on for months, possibly to the end of the year. But I have been officially eliminated, so I just wanted to do a quick wrap up. This is the tournament that started January 1st, and in the first round, I won a bunch of games on time. As often happens in these daily tournaments, several of the players just don't come and make their first move. And in the first round that happened, I won a bunch of games that way and only ended up having to play against 5 or 6 opponents out of the 12. I ended up tying with the highest seeded player in that group of 12. And so I advanced with a little bit of campaigning. The computer didn't automatically advance me. But anyway, so I advanced to round 2 for a new group of 12 players, all of whom had been one of, the top player in their first round, or like me, tying. And this was the first time I ever got to play any game against a titled player, which was International Master Valery Grinev. I believe might be close to how you say their name, from the Ukraine. And I got a draw against him. I have a whole nother video about that. And a few people timed out in the second round as well, which surprised me. A couple of these, the Shudiks and however you pronounce the other one, they didn't play any moves in these games and just didn't show up and timed out. Then a few others above them played several moves, or in case of a couple of like 14 or 20 moves, and then timed out. That's what the red zeros shown here are for. And I ended up finishing number 6 in my second group of 12 for round 2. So I was pretty proud of that, including the draw against the International Master. And my last 2 games ended this morning on timeouts against a player that ended up rated slightly higher than me. And I guess they saw that there was no chance of them advancing, so they just didn't come back and finish their last few games. But because they were my last 2 games in the tournament and I won both of them on time, I'm going to run through them real quick right now. This is the game against Toskbik Chess from Turkey, in which I had the black pieces. We played simultaneous daily games against each opponent. One reason these games lasted the longest is because in a daily game, when each person just comes and checks every few hours to see if their opponent has moved, when your opponent is on the exact opposite side of the world as you, there's only a couple of hours at the beginning and end of each day in which you're both awake. So very often I would wake up in the morning and see that my opponent had moved during my night, their day, and I would make a move, but then they're going to bed pretty quick, going to sleep, and then I wait all day and they're sleeping, and then they'll make a move when they wake up sometimes. In this player's case, I think they only moved in their evening, which was just before I woke up, something like that, however the time difference accounts for. So we ended up only making 1 or 2 moves at most each every day. That's why those games last longer than, say, my games against opponents in Europe, especially Western Europe, which is closer to me in time zones, or other opponents from the United States. Regardless, in this game, my opponent played with d4, which opened with d4, which I am still not very good at playing against. And even though it says 1799, that's their score after they lost to me. While we were playing this game, this player was rated in the 1800s, and I was around in the mid 1300s. The score that it shows for me at the bottom is after I got huge numbers of points for winning this game. So let me just show you what happened. We played, starting off with an Indian game that turned into the Queen's Gambit declined. And then here it switches, transposes, and it's called the semi-slot defense. Regardless, let me put the engine on there. Oh, okay. And since it's running anyway, might as well show it on the screen. Both of us played normal opening moves, I think, throughout. I think that was my first departure from the opening. I was supposed to have played, I think it wanted me to play b6 there, and I'm not sure why. But regardless, we're pretty close to 0, as you can see from the evaluation. If we'll make the best moves, which I did here. My opponent made the best move there. I didn't respond with quite the best move here. I was supposed to just castle, looks like. I did those kind of out of order. I think it wanted me to do this after I castled. It doesn't matter that much, I guess, because my opponent castled and then I castled. And so we're still pretty close. And we're playing decent, smart moves. Here, I wanted to advance my d-pawn and maybe start breaking open the center, so I moved my rook over. This, I guess, keeps me from putting a knight there at some point. And then I went ahead with my plan of pushing the e-pawn forward, which turns out to be my best move. They took. I took. They played their only good move here, which was to take with that knight. I played my only good move. As you can see, everything else is a blunder. I take the knight. My opponent has a couple of moves that don't lose. And I didn't see that coming at all. Because that pawn's protected, you know? I need to stop thinking about pieces being protected, which mean and thinking that means they can't be taken. Because obviously protected means they can be taken, just that you could take back. And I didn't expect that move at all. I thought here at this point, what's my opponent going to do? But I guess they saw that they were about to lose on this exchange and decided to do something about that. Or maybe they are just, because they're rated 1800, they know a lot more about these tactics than I do. Regardless, they did what the computer said was the best move. And here I did not. I have one move that's not a mistake, and that's to take here first. And I didn't understand this for a while. I ran this evaluation several times. In the game, I thought, if I take this first, you know what I thought? I didn't even realize my knight will be here now. I thought they would get my bishop for free, but I should have realized if I take this first with my knight, then when they take my bishop, I could take back. But I was supposed to take this knight first and then worry about the bishops. And it says they wouldn't even take my bishop right off the bat. If I took the knight, they would take with the pawn like this. I'll just show you what should have happened. I'll take with my knight. Their only good move is to take with the pawn first, not with the bishop. So if they take with the pawn first, then I take with the bishop. They take with their queen, and I take this pawn. Okay? Now what happened was different than that. What happened was I got confused about this tactic, and I took with the bishop first, which is a mistake, and I think I eventually figured out why. Well, first of all, they don't have to take that back immediately. They take this knight with check, forcing me to capture that, and the only way to capture it that's not a blunder is with my queen, and then they take my bishop. Now, it looks the same, right? I lost a bishop and they lost a bishop. I lost a knight, they lost a knight. So what's the difference? The difference between this position and this position is that they also lost that pawn. Look back at this one. There's a pawn here. Oh, sorry, here. This pawn. That's the only difference I could come up with. I mean, besides the placement of my queen here rather than here. In the order that I was supposed to take, we come out even, completely even on material. But in the order that ended up going, they ended up with this extra pawn. So this is what should have happened. And we would have been close to even. White still would have had the advantage that white always has, but it's not a lot. But what we ended up with was this, white having an extra pawn, and I suppose my queen is misplaced here. I would much rather not have this pawn on the board and have my queen right here in the middle, which is what would have happened. But instead, this is what we ended up with. And that turned out to be the mistake that slowly disintegrated my position in this game. And we did play some of the best moves. I surprisingly enough. My opponent played the best move here. I played the second or third best move. Well, the engine can't make up its mind. Trying to pin this bishop. My opponent plays the best move. Here I did not play the best move. And you see my opponent's advantage increases here. I wasn't sure what else to do at this point. I know that I'm down a pawn against a player rated 1800, and it slowly got worse from there. We traded. I think that turned out to be the best move here, to take that rook first and then take the bishop. But still, I'm down 3. My opponent makes the second best move. I make the third best move, which was getting my king off this diagonal. And now here my opponent did not make any of the top 3 moves. They took this pawn, and I took back. So they lost a little bit of their advantage. But then I didn't play one of the best moves. Oh, sorry, they didn't play one of the best moves again, and I did. So we're down to like 2-point advantage. So I think maybe, you know, when I'm doing this evaluation, I thought, oh, maybe I was coming back. But they played the best move, and I did not again. My idea was eventually to get this pawn here and maybe get some sort of challenge against these from behind, or maybe back here. I don't know. And my opponent makes the best move. And here I'm just supposed to go ahead with my plan, or offer to trade queens over here. It says queen to b5. That I don't understand. But regardless, I'm down by nearly 5 now, and I went there, which made it even worse. I was thinking, let's trade queens here and get a passed pawn, but obviously the rook would get behind it. But there is where my opponent didn't come back for 24 hours. I think if I were them, I would have just offered a draw here, because I would have taken it. And then they wouldn't have lost as many points as they lost, and I wouldn't have gained as many points as I gained. Now let's take a look at the second game. Now my other game against the same opponent, I played with the white pieces, and I did very well, I think. Now, you saw how in the last game there was one mistake I had when I took in the wrong order, and that's what put me at a permanent disadvantage that I never recovered from. This game was the same way, except it took longer to get there. Now, I've evaluated a bunch of these London-ish positions over time, so I knew that several of these in the first 7 to 8 moves were the best possible moves. That one wasn't, but I was beyond my comfort zone at this point. We're at move 7 now, but here I made the best move without really noticing. My opponent makes the best move. I make the best move again, looking at this square, lining up my battery, hoping to dislodge this knight at some point with some sort of trade here perhaps, which would get my bishop in there and maybe force this knight out, and then I could line something up. But regardless, my opponent played their best move. I played the best move because when the knight moved, I didn't want it coming in here and starting to mess around in this area. So I moved h3 to keep that from happening. My opponent begins to reroute this knight. I assume to get in front of the king and all this. Not sure where they would... Oh, then they would also be directly challenging that bishop at that point. That's the other reason to move this h-pawn up, so the bishop can go behind. But regardless, we're still pretty close to even. I'm developing a slight advantage. My best move was castling. Here, my opponent did not play their best move. I knew to take that. At least I was pretty sure. Lot of position in London positions where the bishop has gone there. I've dropped it back. I've dropped it back here, and it turns out later when I'm evaluating the advantage, the engine says just to take there. So I did, and now look, I've got a 1-point advantage. Here, I'm thinking about trying to open attack here. I learned from the Jeremy Silman book that when you have your pawns pointing a certain direction, it's often the best idea to try to attack on that side. And so that's what explains my next move is moving this rook over. I want to protect b5 and eventually b6 push. You can see that my knight and bishop are also guarding that spot. So move 13 here. My opponent played the best move. I played the best move. Looking back at this evaluation, I was really proud of myself for doing so well against, again, this person was rated over 800 when I was playing them. Excuse me. But here I did not play the best move. It wants to bring my other rook. Because even though there were pieces here, this is a semi-open file, the C file. But I didn't see that. And decided to go ahead and break this open, which we did. My opponent played the best move, stopping all my plans over here. So I decided to go back to this. Not a good idea. But very soon, my opponent plays the best move. I played the best move. They played the best move. But now here, when I did that, look at the evaluation. Near 0 now. My idea is to try to break this open, because I have a bishop and a protected rook guarding this spot, and the queen's right behind it. That's why I moved my rook over here. But my opponent played that, which turned out to not be good at all. What they should have done, as you can see from the engine suggestion, either move this rook up here to guard this pawn, or put one of their rooks on c8. Okay, also to guard that pawn. But they put the knight back there, didn't put an extra guard on that pawn. So now, look at the evaluation. I do this. Now, my idea was, if they don't take, which they shouldn't, they should get the queen out of this line here, right? That's what the engine is suggesting. Oh, sorry, here. It says queen f4, or queen e7, or queen f6, right? My idea is to take here, putting the bishop in danger. The rook is hitting the queen. The queen has to go, and then I win the bishop with the pawn. But my opponent did something even worse than any of that. They took the pawn. And I had no idea it was up by 6 here, but I knew I had something. I took this. Because look where this bishop is pointing. That's check over there. So, and when the bishop moves, the queen's hit. So my idea is, if they move the queen to get out of this discovered attack, then I'll win the rook for a bishop. And obviously, if they move the rook, I get the discovered attack with check and win the queen for a bishop. So they had to do something, and they didn't even play their best move here. So I won the... They moved over here to force a queen trade. So I took the queen trade, and then I won the rook for a bishop. I was really proud of that. And of course, I didn't know the evaluation as I was playing, but I knew I had an advantage here. Even though it's small, I know that I have a rook for a bishop. And I wasn't always playing the best moves here. My opponent did that, was the best move. This was not, but my idea was to reroute through here to keep the rook from going on that file, and also to hit the bishop. And I did that. Here my opponent, it says they should have just played g5. But they played that instead. And I played the best move, because my idea is to go here, to fork the king and this bishop. They played that. I forked the king and the bishop. They have to move the king. I take the bishop. And even though this gives them a passed pawn, every trade, when you're up material, every trade helps. And yes, it says they should take this pawn, but then I can get in front of it so it's not going anywhere. I mean, at that point, I could probably also check or check, something like that. It's going to work out well for me. And here is where my opponent didn't come back. But in this game, unlike the other one where they didn't come back and they had a winning position, in this game I was pretty sure I had a winning position. So, and I did once I looked at it. I'm up significantly here. So I'm really proud of this game, and I'm proud of my performance in the tournament overall. Let me just show you one last thing. This is my player page from that tournament, the 2022 chess.com daily chess tournament. And right here it shows I won 33 games. Again, some of those were on time when the opponent never played a move, and I didn't get any rating points for those. But most of them were actual games where either the opponent played quite a bit and then didn't come back, or I actually won. And only 10 losses, all of which were to players rated higher than me, most of them significantly higher, and 1 draw against the international master. So I have no idea what my final placement will be in the tournament, because as I said, there are still over 1,000 active players, lots of rounds to go. They'll be divided into groups of 12. Only one person from each one will advance. but there were 33,000 people in this tournament, if I'm not mistaken, 33 or 34,000 people. And I was, I think, at least in the top 10% that advanced to the second round, and finished in the just barely in the top half of my second round group. This is my first round group where I was one of the top 2 finishers tied. And then my second group here where I was number 6 out of 12. So I'm proud of my performance. It was an adventure. Thank you for watching and sticking with me throughout this.